This episode of Keys to the Shop is brought to you by Prima Coffee. Whether it's espresso machines, manual brewing devices, or general coffee shop needs, they seek to pursue the most innovative coffee products, both domestic and abroad, to offer their customers. Find out more at prima-coffee.com. This is Keys to the Shop, episode 42, Supplying and Selecting Equipment with Steve Rhinehart of Prima Coffee. Well, hey everybody, and welcome to another episode of Keys to the Shop. My name is Chris DeFiorio. I'm your host, and of course, this podcast is dedicated to giving you insights, inspiration, and the tools you need to grow as a coffee service professional. I'm excited that you decided to spend time with me today. And if you're listening to this now, then we all survived the solar eclipse. That's really fantastic. So congratulations. I hope you didn't burn your eyes out. But it's also a special episode today because it's airing on my birthday, August 22nd. So you're listening officially to the voice of a 39-year-old man. But today's episode really is special because my friend Steve Rhinehart of Prima Coffee is joining us on the episode. So Steve has been in specialty coffee world for about 8 years now. And ever since getting into coffee, he's just been fascinated by and really digging into the details of specialty coffee equipment and its limits and its capacities, hacking it, making it better, or just learning how to use it in an expert way. Steve has always been that kind of guy. And starting from a barista and home enthusiast in upstate New York to now as the brand manager for Prima Coffee, the sponsor for this show. So I'm honored to have him on the show today to shed some light on the ins and outs, some of the details of specialty coffee equipment supply. So there are many companies out there that do this, and not all of them are created equal. You can, and many do, have businesses where they supply equipment, and the equipment that they supply is simply based on market demand or on, what's trendy and new and things like that. But the best ones out there, ones like Prima Coffee, are the ones who put a lot of effort into the curation and testing of the offerings that they put on their website so that the people who purchase them can trust that there is a lot of due diligence that went on behind the scenes in order to bring the best to the marketplace. And that's what Prima does, and that's what we're going to talk about a little bit in this episode is how does that curation process work? What does it look like to test this equipment? And how does Steve's role as brand manager fit into all of that? I wanted to talk about this for a little bit because in specialty coffee, we are an ecosystem dependent on supply from many different angles. We've got farmers, green coffee importers, roasters. We get milk from dairies or from food service vendors, cups and lids and napkins, things like that. And then we get our smallwares and our equipment that we need to make the coffee on from people like Prima Coffee, an equipment supplier. And so I thought it's a worthy thing for us to talk about because it has a huge impact on the success of a coffee shop. In addition to all of that, we're going to be talking about the top 3 considerations, the 3 things that Steve, in all of his years of working with equipment in specialty coffee, recommends for us to look at and do before we make an equipment selection. It's easy for us to make purchases and regret them if we haven't put in proper thought into the right areas before making those purchases. And there's nothing worse than buyer's remorse, especially when you're dealing with large pieces of equipment that set you back a few grand. So it's going to be great to hear Steve talk about what considerations need to be made before making a really good purchase, a wise purchase. So let's get to our conversation now with Steve Rhinehart of Prima Coffee. All right, Steve, welcome to Keys to the Shop. I'm excited to have you here.
Yeah, thank you for having me, Chris.
We are not strangers, you and I. We kind of started in the same place. We're both native Northeasterners in New York. It's kind of funny that we ended up down here in Louisville.
I know. I tell people that you followed me down.
Yeah, it is a cool story, though. And speaking of it, I wonder, I mean, how did you come to be the brand manager at Prima Coffee in Louisville, Kentucky, a Syracuse boy like you?
Well, it starts out as a sad story because I was unemployed in New York City. I had been doing social media for Chobani, the yogurt company. And I guess they had some restructuring or something in the marketing department. So a whole bunch of us found ourselves without jobs for a little while. And I just happened to be on Twitter one day, and I had already been familiar with Prima. I had bought things from them a couple times. They actually sent me an Able disc filter once to test out as part of a promotion that they were doing. So I was kind of a fan of them. And yeah, I just saw that they were hiring for marketing, and I was like, I like coffee. I can do marketing. Let's do this. Louisville can't possibly be that bad, and I'm running out of money really quickly without a job in New York. So yeah, I applied, and a couple interviews later, they'd hired me.
Nice. That was fun. You were in Syracuse, New York, where we both spent some time. I grew up there, and you were a customer for a while. That's how I got to know you at Cafe Kubal, and I remember you getting that job. It's really interesting that you're going down to Louisville. Then all of a sudden, I find myself going down to Louisville. So yeah, I guess I did follow you. It wasn't even maybe, a year afterwards?
It was only a couple of months, I think.
Oh, really? Oops. Well, there you go. And how has it been going? What's involved in that job of brand manager for Prima Coffee?
Yeah, I mean, for a coffee nerd like myself, it's a really cool job. We get to kind of look at a lot of products and test them, and obviously, find the right sort of products to put on the site, list, and sell to our customers. But there's a lot of work that involves just kind of being hands-on, and I get to do a lot of research into the coffee industry, kind of keep tabs on who's doing what and where. I wear a lot of hats because we're a sort of small crew. So I do a lot. I talk to advertisers, I list products, I do product overview videos. Like I said, I sort of vet and research products that we're considering bringing in. But it's a really cool place to be because it's an interesting part of the coffee industry that I never had really considered before starting at Prima. And now that I'm in it, I really love it.
And you said you were a coffee nerd before. You were already messing around with home brewing equipment and espresso, things like that on your own.
Yeah, absolutely. I was one of those guys who, when I first met you, I had already kind of been exposed to coffee. My first job was in Rochester, New York at a coffee shop called The Leaf and Bean. I was a barista there, and that's kind of where I fell into the rabbit hole. But then I, found my way to the Coffee Geek forums and started reading all these resources and buying all this equipment and putting a PID in a Hamilton Beach espresso machine and,
wow.
Things like that where, I kind of, there are certain things that really grab my interest like that. And coffee was just this endlessly rich kind of hobby that I could get instant feedback on. And that's sort of, that kind of works really well for me, is being able to like brew a batch and being like, oh man, I messed that up, but think about how I messed that up, and maybe do another brew immediately afterward and get a different result and get feedback for what I just did. So, I kind of fell in love with coffee along the way. And in Syracuse, while you were at Kubal, I'd come over and bug you about all kinds of stuff because, I was just really interested to see more of the professional side as well. Working as a barista is a little bit different than talking to somebody who's got as much experience as you have. So I wasn't really exposed to much at that point. Although now I think I'd be the guy that Steve, 6 or 8 years ago, or however long that was, would be kind of looking up to to try and learn a little bit more about coffee.
Oh, totally. And you still, I'm not sure if you're still doing this, but you were pulling shifts at Quills all along the way too.
Yeah. Since shortly after I moved to Louisville, I started hanging out at Quills just because it was kind of on the way home from work. And one of the baristas there, Michael Butterworth, I think he kind of keyed into the fact that I was this really enthusiastic coffee nerd, and we started throwing around the idea of pulling shifts at Quills, and here we are almost 3 years later, actually.
Mm-hmm.
I'm still doing shifts, not all that frequently, but probably a couple times a month. I'll get behind bar on a weekend and kind of keep my skills fresh and serve a whole bunch of drinks to customers.
Awesome. And Michael's one of those OGs from Louisville. Like there was the whole movement of coffee in Louisville was traced back to just a few people, home baristas back in, I forget whose kitchen, just making latte art and testing out coffees. It always surprised me just how much was happening in Louisville. And, here we are just kind of caught in the tractor beam of the South or the Midwest, whoever you ask. I don't know. Some people say Louisville's not the South, but there's a lot going on here in terms of coffee. So that's really refreshing. And it's interesting because Prima is in this kind of southern city and it's not in the Northwest. That's my first thought is like, oh, Louisville, Kentucky, really? Because you go to the website and it's done well, and the product and the service and everything is done really well. So it's really nice to have that here in Louisville. How did Prima start? It didn't start out, I don't think. The company itself is not originally in coffee.
Yeah, that's right. And it's interesting that you mentioned sort of Louisville's own history and specialty coffee, because I think Prima's history is not completely tied to the growth of a bunch of nerdy coffee people bringing that interest back into their coffee companies, but it kind of sprung off that same enthusiasm and some of the same people even. So Prima Coffee is a subsidiary brand of Prima Supply, which is a restaurant equipment company that was started, well over a decade ago, I suppose, here in Louisville. It's a family-owned company. So, they've been here for a little while, and they've been doing restaurant equipment supply for some time. They sell refrigeration, they sell cold cases, display cases, all kinds of stuff for restaurants and, that sort of industry. And it was a couple of people who were basically those same, coffee nerds who were like, hey, we saw all this restaurant stuff. Maybe we could sell coffee equipment as well. So they, eventually started bringing in some coffee gear. They brought in the first V60s to Louisville. And Prima Coffee was born sometime around 2009. So it kind of split off into its own thing, and it's just grown since then. We're still fairly small, like I said, but, we've done, I think, and I try to be humble when I say this, but I think we've done a pretty good job of kind of building that brand from the restaurant side of things. We weren't immediately known for being coffee equipment purveyors, but we got an interesting start because, like you said, there wasn't a lot going on in Louisville in terms of coffee, and we're an interesting location. Like, people definitely see the West Coast and the Northwest as sort of those coffee-centric cities, Seattle, Portland, even San Francisco, Los Angeles, where they can probably look to for coffee equipment, whereas we're sort of this unexpected presence in the Midwest that has access to all this stuff. And I think people are genuinely surprised if they weren't aware that we are in Louisville to find out that we are in Louisville, because they just sort of naturally expect us to be a Seattle company or something like that.
It's really great to have you guys local, because when I'm ordering for the cafe, I don't have long to go, but if I run into a crunch a couple of times, somebody from there will be on their way back home and they'll just drop it off in the cafe for me. That's definitely great service. So I'm really glad that it's able to be done because of your proximity to us. And you said about having a a really good buildup of your brand. I agree. Let me ask you this. We supply coffee to customers in the cafe, right? And, you supply cafes with supplies. It's kind of like this symbiotic relationship. And I wonder, based on that, what is your role? What do you envision Prima as in the whole ecosystem of cafes and coffee service and specialty coffee?
So that role, I think, has evolved a little bit as we've matured, but it's also kind of been fairly, not set in stone, but fairly well designed from the beginning. And that is basically to serve as kind of specialty coffee equipment purveyors, where when we started, we had our sights set on the specialty coffee industry. We weren't as interested in gas stations or commodity kind of, large chains or something like that. We were really interested in the quality aspect of coffee, the craft, and bringing that not only to the commercial customers that we might have, but also to the consumer side of things and helping to facilitate that interaction. So our whole philosophy is mainly to find those products that kind of stand out. It might be an espresso machine. It might be some kind of manual brewing device. We aren't super picky about the products that we bring in, but we want to make sure that, for one, that they have some sort of distinct advantage, and then also it's a product that we can stand behind. We don't want to bring in something that's kind of a piece of junk, but we'll try and play different. Not everybody has the same budget, obviously, so we'll try and play different kind of financial categories, but there are limits as well. If we bring something in, we have to kind of be able to stick our reputation behind it. And we want to cultivate this reputation for being experts who know coffee equipment, and are kind of able to speak with you on whatever level you are with that sort of specialty focus. So I think that that's sort of built into our philosophy. We have a whole actual kind of guide document that we use to sort of teach new employees how to be Prima. And I think, we also try to hire people that are sort of intrinsically aligned with what Prima stands for. But, we have these principles that we just have actually written down and say, this is who we are and this is what we want to do. And mostly that's, just bring great coffee to people, make it accessible. And, not only if you're a coffee professional, but if you're, somebody who just wants to dive into the hobby like I did, however many years ago that was.
If you didn't hear me ask the first question about is supplying equipment, and just ask yourself the question, what's it like being a coffee shop serving customers? Everything you said would fit just the same way. And I wonder, does that give you an advantage? Do you feel that working to your benefit when you're talking with customers? Because you're talking about an employee handbook. You've got a good product mix on different tiers of price that you bring in. You curate what you offer. You want to be experts in coffee, and you want to serve well. These are all things that resonate with me as a manager, as a professional, as a barista. And does that make you better at serving those who serve coffee?
I like to think it does. I don't know that it's necessarily a prerequisite. I think if you have some empathy and you can kind of put yourself in other people's shoes, you can kind of take those steps to saying, okay, this product is going to make a barista's life better because it does this and this. Or this product is going to kind of wow the end consumer because, flashy lights and buttons or something like that. You can still kind of take those mental steps and figure things out. I think in my position, I really enjoy having that, face-to-face interaction with real customers behind the bar, as well as, just sort of as an accessory to my work at Prima. I'm not saying that I lack that empathy, but it's mainly kind of a refresher. It centers you. It puts you back in that position where you're like, okay, I'm on bar and I'm juggling 6 milk drinks right now, and I've got a customer asking me for, or where the bathroom is. And then I've got another customer who said that they just spilled something at their table, and I have to provide all of them equally good service. I have to make good drinks, and I have to figure out how to get a table cleaned in the next 5 minutes and all that stuff. You have to sort of remember that a barista is not just a person who makes coffee. A barista is a customer service position, as well as kind of it's that hospitality position. It's sort of a catch-all. You have to do everything. And maybe not in every cafe, but a lot of baristas do have to clean the bathrooms as well as make drinks in the same shift. And they have to wash dishes, and they have to take the garbage out, and they have to figure out when to make time for all these things, as well as, order new supplies for the next day and all that. So being able to come to the job with that insight, as well as the technical knowledge and the ability to kind of present products in a way that's relevant to the people who are going to use them, it's something that just makes my job a lot easier, and it makes it a lot easier to communicate to people. And I think, at the end of the day, I think it helps make our customers a little bit happier. We are able to bring them information that is relevant, is respectful of their needs, and acknowledges that it's kind of it's not an easy job to serve people coffee. Sometimes it sounds simple, but it's not. So I think, having those skills kind of come together has been kind of a good sort of strength for Prima, as well as for me to kind of just grow as a person and sort of realize that there's all these people out there who have to do this every day, and I only do it twice a month, but there are people who do it for their living, and I would love to make their jobs easier, and I'd love to make them happier behind the bar, and make their job make it easier for them to make their customers happy.
This is why you're the brand manager, Steve, at Prima. This the kind of thing I imagine is reinforced in the group at Prima. And you mentioned the values in the handbook that people have. And this all sounds like what I would be reading if I was reading How to Be Prima. Is that the case?
Yeah, I think so. I mean, like I said, the cafe experience is not necessarily a prerequisite for being able to have good customer service or meet people where they're at. But yeah, I think that, it's when I asked my boss if it was okay to work for one of the local coffee companies, at the time, he was enthusiastic. He said, yeah, of course, go ahead and make that happen. Go be the barista behind the bar, and, bring that experience back to work and see what it has to offer, us as a company, and what we can offer our customers in turn. So yeah, I think that we have a culture in the company that says, if you are going to be enthusiastic about coffee, if you're going to be enthusiastic about, doing your job well, and being able to offer, better service or something like that, then yeah, go ahead. It's gonna be encouraged, and it's gonna be reinforced. And if it has some value to you as a person, and makes you happy, and makes it makes life better for you, and thus makes it easier for you to do your job well, then we're totally happy to do that. I don't think that everybody in our company wants to go be a barista in their free time, but I certainly, wouldn't want to be the only one if somebody else came forward and said, hey, yeah, I'm going to go work at Sundergoss or Quills or Heine Brothers or whatever else, or Starbucks even, that experience is valuable. And even if it was just like, hey, I picked up this restaurant job on the side, or, I'm opening my own Etsy shop or something, we value that. We value whatever you can bring back to the company, and, kind of give back to our customers as well. All that experience is valid.
Yeah, so being heavily involved in the community of baristas and cafes and specialty coffee industry, there are a lot of things that you are involved with that has given you great experiences in coffee. What are some of the things that you're most excited about in terms of participation in the industry at large?
So yeah, we go to a couple of trade shows a year, and we kind of make a showing there, and we mingle with our coffee friends and hang out. But we also offer sort of sponsorships to community events all over the country. So, when people come to us and they say, hey, we're going to throw a latte art throwdown, would you guys be willing to sponsor? Sometimes that's, kind of takes the shape of giving some prizes for the winners or helping them plug it on social media, or, giving some support in some other ways. And then, there are certain times where we're able to actually take more of a direct involvement in the events themselves. So a couple of years ago, we helped Quills host the Eastern Regional Aeropress Championships here in Louisville. And actually this coming month, in September, we're helping to host the Coffee Champs Preliminary here in Louisville. So that's going to be a pretty big event. They're doing both Barista and Brewers Cup. So there's going to be people from all over the place, and we're going to help, throw in some small wares as well as some prizes for winners. And we'll be there. I think we'll be able to do some demos and stuff and just kind of help make the whole thing happen. And so that'll be really, really cool. And it's always great to kind of get out there and get face to face with not only the people who, might be our customers, but also just the people who are involved in the industry and kind of hear them talk about their companies or what they're doing in coffee and just kind of, be involved in the community that way.
Right. And these are people making coffee, and you guys are part of that equation, making great coffee happen. I remember I did a demonstration of an old USB-C routine at a throwdown that Prima hosted at Quills like ages ago. I don't know, like 6-7 years ago, something like that. So Prima has definitely been involved in the industry in that way for a while, and this is a great time in Louisville to be hosting the preliminaries. Is great for our city. We're all excited here, so super excited to have Prima be a part of that as well. And it reinforces too just that empathy that you were describing earlier. When you're on the phone with somebody and they're asking about equipment and their shops. I mean, you've likely met a lot of these people at events, and now you're on the phone with them.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, I don't actually get on the phones all that much, but we've got a team of people who will go to the trade shows with us, and they're exactly the people that you're talking to on the phone. And they're meeting people who come by the booth, or they're going to somebody else's booth and meeting people. It's the coffee community itself, on the professional side as well as the consumer side, is really interesting because people are so open and friendly, and it's just so rewarding to be a part of that in some way. So I've really enjoyed kind of being in this side of the business and being able to support the community a bit more.
The customers that you serve, you're not just serving professionals, you're serving consumers too. Talk a little bit about like who it is that frequents the website and orders from Prima Coffee. What kind of a mix of people do you have?
Yeah, so the website itself is primarily, I would say, consumer facing. So the actual website as it's presented is mainly going to appeal to people who are going to use products at home. So we tend to emphasize, manual brewing devices. We sell a lot of, you'll notice that we sell single items rather than like a case of items, even though we have a wholesale program. So the website is there to sort of facilitate sales with our home consumer audience. It's also there, you'll still find commercial equipment. Most of our consumers aren't going to be buying a Peak grinder, for example, but that's on the website. So we have a decent mix. I'd say it's right about 50-50 in terms of like actual like revenue. Those retail sales through the website and the more commercial side sales sometimes come through the website, but often also come through email or phone or what have you, because especially on the commercial side, people tend to come with questions and they'll ask if this machine is right for the volume that they're expecting or something like that. So yeah, the website is set up to be not only like a catalog of those products that we think are, most worthwhile to share with the market, but also, if you've been to our website, you'll know that we do overview videos for not every product, but as many as we can. And that's to show off what they do, how they work, tell you a little bit about how they, brew coffee, what to expect from them, that sort of thing. So we're also sort of building this kind of content catalog, I suppose, alongside the products. And then, of course, we have like a blog, and we call it the Learning Center, where we have articles that are specifically dedicated to teaching coffee skills or telling you about products or comparing products or that sort of thing, to kind of help you make decisions about how to, maybe advance in your coffee skills or, tweak those recipes that you're doing with your Kalita Wave, or even select equipment for your cafe. So the website is a sort of interesting place because it's kind of an amalgam of information for consumers as well as commercial customers. But the actual sort of retail side is most tailored to those home consumers.
So 50-50 consumers and professionals going to your site and to Prima for supplying themselves with equipment. And you have this spread. You're talking about this mix of different price ranges of items. You have a really wide variety of items on the website. And it makes me want to know, what goes into the curation process? I mean, you must be like a kid in a candy store, thinking about, where you came from, trying to put that Hamilton Beach PID in there. And now I go to the website, I'm like, man, Steve, he must have played with all of this stuff. And there's got to be a metric for what makes the website and what doesn't. So what goes into that curation process?
It's really interesting. We don't have a set sort of protocol or standard for what is selected. We'll basically give anything a try once or twice, or, put it on our, bench in our break room for a week or something like that. Often, we've vetted products and never bring them in by just sort of taking a look and seeing how they're marketing themselves and just trying to figure out, we're not super interested in, a K-cup adapter for an AeroPress or something like that. It's, we have to sort of be selective about what we bring in, because like I said, we're not super concerned about what our reputation is, but we have sort of brought this reputation around us that is, we focus on specialty products that, like I said, we can stand behind. We can ensure our customers are going to be a good fit for their needs. They're going to last however long we expect them to last, that they're manufactured well, that the company is going to be around for a little while, that sort of thing. So we take risks here and there, but we also we just want to make sure that if we provide or offer something to our customers, that there's going to be some support for it. It's going to be a good product. It's going to fit the needs that they have, and that it's not going to be more of a headache than anything else. So we have actually, initially brought products on that we've ended up getting rid of because they become a headache somewhere down the line. But that initial process of bringing things in is usually well, do we need this product in our catalog? Do we need another tamper, or do we need another grinder? What sort of role does this fill? What niche does it fill? What's the price point? Who can we market it to? Do they need this option? So we just kind of think about it like that. Every product is a little bit different in terms of approach. So often, if it does get to the point where we ask for a sample or we buy one to test out ourselves, that's where we start to get really rigorous about testing. So with grinders, we're testing grinder tension, we're testing uniformity, we're brewing all kinds of different ways. We're trying to push it to its limits. And especially if we've bought one or we have one that we can keep and we don't need to return, we're going to kind of try and break it sometimes.
Nice.
If I've got a grinder on my bench or something like that, I'm going to figure out just where I can push it to. And I'm thinking about, what a person at home is trying to do. If I've got a consumer level grinder, I'm going to try and grind an entire pound of coffee through it. Even though most of them are not designed for that, I'm going to see what happens.
Yeah.
Does it shut itself off? Does it, smell like burning plastic? Does the coffee catch on fire or something like that? Not that that's ever happened, but I want to see exactly how this product performs and what we can expect from it. Because the more that we test it, the more knowledgeable we are about our products that we carry. So if it does end up on the website, any question that comes to us, no matter how esoteric, is at least something that we've tried to think about. We're caught off guard sometimes, but we try and at least build a really well-rounded knowledge around a product. We are not the kind of company that says, oh yeah, we'll carry that. That's fine. Whatever you have for marketing copy, that's what we're going to put on our listing. Every single listing that we put on our website is written by hand by somebody who has done something with that product. A lot of them are written by me. So, I take whatever hands-on experience I have about whatever I've just tested, and I put it into words, and I tell you what I think about it. I tell you what its limitations might be. I tell you what sort of fit it has for a barista or for a home consumer or whatever. And I try to be really honest with you about my impression, Prima's impression about whatever this product is. And that, that just doesn't happen unless you have hands-on experience. So anything that ends up on the website, almost anything I should say, there are certain things where it's like, well, if La Marzocco releases another machine, we would love to get our hands on it. Sometimes that's not economically feasible. We don't necessarily have $15,000 or something like that to spend on a machine just to test it. Mm-hmm. But we can take a look or try and go see it at a trade show or something like that and get a really good idea of what this has to offer. Ideally, we get hands-on time, but like I said, that's not always feasible, unfortunately. We would very much prefer to have hands-on every single product that comes through our doors and goes out of our warehouse.
So it sounds like a lot of this is fed through just paying attention to what's going on in the industry. And I imagine it's just because you're out there and you're hearing this and you're involved in the industry, and that's where you're getting these ideas. Do you have people also just asking you, when are you going to get this, or are you going to get that item?
Yeah, we certainly have people coming to us and saying, hey, I saw this really cool thing. Have you guys heard of it? Are you going to bring it in? And, a good amount of the time I hadn't heard of it before that, and I'll take a look at it. And like I said, I'll kind of put it through the same kind of thought process as any other product. And, we don't want to get caught up in hype and carry something that's just, super trendy and cool or something like that. We want to make sure that it makes sense for us and in our catalog. But like I said, we'll give anything a fair shake. We'll definitely try it out, or at least, take a look for that first time. But yeah, I guess I'm one of the lucky people who can say that part of their job is going on Twitter, going on Facebook, going on coffee forums and seeing what's up and seeing what people are, what they're into, what they're trying out, what new products they saw at, a restaurant show in China that may not have made it to the American market yet, or, a product that a, European friend is manufacturing in his garage and is looking for distribution somewhere, like that. That is a really interesting part of my job, like doing that sort of research. I maybe even wouldn't call it research because it's so loose. It's just kind of browsing and seeing what people are doing. It's something that's actually been able to give us a few opportunities to bring in some cool new products that people haven't heard of or weren't expecting to kind of come to the market. I think like one of those is something that we got recently called the Espezola. It's a like portafilter shaped group head cleaning tool that uses like a silicone brush head, and it's simple. It's just molded plastic and a piece of silicone, and it does a great job. It's cleaner than using a rag, and it's a little bit easier and more user friendly than maybe a brush would be, because you're not burning your fingers. And all you have to do is wiggle it back and forth once. And it's a Swiss product, and we wouldn't have heard about it unless I'd been browsing, I think, Home Barista or something like that. So I think I would certainly appreciate if more people were coming to us saying like, hey, here's this thing that I'm really excited about. I just heard about it, and I think you guys should look at it. Because I maybe it would take me a little less time to kind of find new things to check out and new trends and that sort of stuff. But I really do enjoy that part of my job. It's a little bit time consuming sometimes, but it's really interesting what you can turn up. Like all corners of the internet have something interesting to talk about coffee these days. And, you might find a new hand grinder, or you might find the new commercial product that you wasn't really on your radar before. And, thanks to other people talking about it, we can check it out and see if it's worthwhile.
So you all are empathizing with what your customers are going through and what they're looking for, and probably in trying to get them a good mix of products that will solve a problem they're having. The problem is, I need an espresso machine, or I need a better kettle for my pour over. So whether it's a consumer or a professional, I think that's where I wanted to sort of dig in here, and I wanted to get from you some tools that we can use. Your customers, those of us who are consumers and those of us who are professionals, we all want good equipment. What are some things from your experience in all of this stuff, what are some things that we can do to make sure we're making the right decision when we select equipment? Like when we're kind of doing your job, essentially, we're going out there to the website and we're saying, oh, I want one of those. I want one of those. It's not as simple as that, though, is it?
No, I mean, so it can be really easy to get maybe even distracted by the variety of things that are out there, but also even just kind of overwhelmed. There's so many grinders if you're looking for a grinder. So I think, the first and biggest piece of advice I would give anybody on, either as a consumer buying something for yourself, or as, a professional buying something for a cafe, try and figure out your budget first. Figure out what you're willing to spend for whatever this, either if it's a brand new thing that you haven't had before or an upgrade over something. Try and determine what you're able to put down, what it's worth to you, just as sort of a first stepping off point. But then, in the back of your mind, be a little bit flexible about it too. So for consumers, I know a lot of people are very surprised by the price of consumer grade grinders. They're so used to kitchen appliances that are under $100, but I can say with pretty good certainty that there aren't very many good, at least electric grinders under $100. And that surprises people. They're not thinking that they should spend that amount of money. So when I tell them that, like, oh yeah, I really like the Baratza Virtuoso, and by the way, it's $230, they're kind of like, oh my gosh, they're aghast. But that's, the Virtuoso is not a super advanced grinder. It's kind of, mid-range as far as consumer grinders go. And you can kind of go up pretty far from there in terms of price point as well as performance. It kind of helps to, like I said, give yourself a starting off point in terms of budget, figure out what you'd like to spend, give yourself a maximum value, but also kind of be ready to hear people out and figure out what's on the market, because you might be surprised at how much you're undervaluing things. We'll occasionally get somebody who calls in and wants to spend, $3,000 on a 3-group machine for their cafe, and we just have to say, look, I'm sorry, that's just an unrealistic budget. Let us talk to you about some of the more budget conscious machines we have and why, you might want to spend a little bit more money. But it's just that, you have to sort of come to this with an expectation that you might need to spend more than you were thinking. But at least give yourself a baseline budget to start with. I think that that's one of the most common things that we see on both sides, is people not really knowing what they want to spend and not really knowing what to expect to spend. So we're happy to help people either way. But, if you want to come a little bit more prepared to that conversation, just have an idea of, how much you want to drain your pocketbook that day.
Well, yeah, if you're a professional too, you are likely, let's say that you've gone to Coffee Fest because you're about to start a coffee shop, right? You've got your business plan, you got your SBA loan, and you've got your budget. And in your budget, you didn't call Prima first to talk about reasonable expectations for pricing, and you've got this $3,000 dream for this 3-group machine. How do you, do people have to go back and sort of retool their like business plan sometimes with you all, that they're sort of like have to come back weeks later and say, okay, now we've figured it out?
I mean, occasionally, we'll get people calling in who are just sort of putting out feelers for what they have to spend. They can look at the prices on our website. Those are there for anyone to see. So if they're calling in and they're saying like, oh man, I just don't want to spend that much on Linea or something, we can say, well, here's some options you might have, and we'll talk to them about their expected volume, and we might try and convince them that the Linea is worth it, but we also don't want to spend people's money for them. Like I said, we try and meet people where they're at, and if where they're at is completely lost, totally overwhelmed by the industry, they want to start their cafe, they have their aspirations, they just want to get to that end goal, we'll try and meet them somewhere along the way. And that might be like saying, okay, well, how much were you going to spend on some grinders? Maybe we can package some things together, or maybe we can give you a deal on some small wares, or just kind of give them a little bit of a dose of that hard spirit reality, and say, look, I'm sorry, I think you just need to expect to spend more, and if you want to come back to us when you have put together a little bit more capital, we'll be happy to help you out and answer any more questions that you have. We don't want to totally destroy somebody's reality or anything like that. And we don't want to be snobby about, somebody trying to buy equipment within their budget. Sometimes you just have to have somewhat extensive conversations with people and try and work with them, get them into a position that makes sense for their financials, as well as what they need to put into their cafe in terms of volume or reliability or what have you.
The temptation is, upon hearing the price tag for some of these things, just go to eBay, find somebody selling a used espresso machine, and you and I both have probably seen a lot of interesting scale formations inside
Yes.
boilers. You never know what you're going to get. Now, sometimes you're like motivated by this gold. Somebody like posts online like, I found this grinder or this espresso machine for like $500. It's normally $5,000, and it works perfectly. I mean, that's like 1 in a million, right?
I think there are times where we have recommended secondhand sales to people. We have our own sort of like used equipment outlet that we have, but the selection isn't always extensive, and we're not actively looking for machines and equipment to buy in order to resell. So if somebody's looking for a grinder for significantly less than we're selling one for, and we can't necessarily work out a deal, we might be like, well, hey, you might try your luck on eBay or something like that, and just kind of, give them some recommendations for what to look for. Let them know what they're in for. If you buy a used grinder, you're probably going to have to replace the burrs. I would just go in with that assumption, as well as the fact that you're going to have to open it up and clean it out. But if the motor's working and, things aren't totally bent out of shape and it wasn't, dropped off a truck somewhere, you might still have a pretty good product in your hands, and you've saved a lot of money. And, we're not afraid to tell people that if that's what really suits their needs. Because, I think the sort of philosophy that we have is, we want to be known for our expertise and our values and our ability to kind of coach people through their equipment buying process. We want to be known as knowledgeable people, as well as helpful and friendly, as well as a good place to buy stuff. Even if we can't make a sale today or something like that, it would have been nice. But at the same time, if we've helped somebody kind of achieve their dream and open up that cafe, or, figure out a problem that has an immediate need that maybe we can't solve right now because, it's going to take us 3 days to ship something, but they have a local option instead or something, and we've helped them solve that problem. I think that just sort of builds good faith and good community, and we want to be there for that as well.
Like a good neighbor.
Exactly, yeah.
So we are going to have to approach this with a budget in mind, and something with some wisdom in it. Do some research. Look at prima-coffee.com. Look at the prices for these things. That's an industry standard for the most part. It gives you a good ballpark. So, and if you're a consumer too, you're going to be able to find the same thing. So you want to know, how much is it going to cost for me to upgrade from my Mr. Coffee Pot to a pour over setup, maybe a Kalita Wave or, something like that. So budget is one of the first things. So what else can we use? What other tool would you recommend people employ to really outfit themselves or their cafe with the right equipment?
I think just as much as sort of understanding the financial side of things is starting to do your research and understand, where equipment fits into the sort of dream model that you have in your head. So if you want to do a lot of pour over brewing or something and you thought that you would be able to do it with just electric kettles, we're probably going to tell you, hey, you might want to think again. You might want to get a water boiler or something, something that is going to boil and heat a large volume of water that's ready to go. You can still put it in those electric kettles, but those take kind of a long time to heat up, and that's just sort of something that people may not think about because maybe they have it at home and they say, oh yeah, this kettle works great, I can just kind of hit a timer, but they aren't serving 25 people pour overs in an environment where they're taking money for that coffee. There's a lot of sort of things that aren't quite apparent when you are just thinking about equipment broadly that we'll be happy to tell people about, but also it helps if you've kind of taken that into consideration as well. Like, what's the usability of this like? What is the maximum volume of this espresso machine, or how fast can this grinder produce espresso fine coffee versus how many shots am I expecting to serve in an hour? So we try and provide that data, and we're, like I said, whenever people come to us with questions, no matter what they are, we're totally happy to help. We can help you better, and I'm sure our competitors and our cohort in the equipment industry would agree. Like, we can help you better if you have a sort of baseline understanding of what you're getting into and what you want. Just as much as understanding what things might cost and how much you want to spend is, taking a few moments and, reading the specifications of that machine that you're thinking about, or looking up the grind speed, or just thinking about sort of the worst case scenario of your cafe situation and how you might need to prepare for that, will also help us kind of, meet those expectations and goals and say, okay, yeah, you probably do need that water boiler if you're expecting to do half of your coffee service during the day as pour overs. Let's talk about that, and what kind of power requirements you might need or something like that. We can take you through the next steps of how to figure out how to implement that into your space. And the same thing on the consumer side. If you're looking for new coffee brewing equipment and you're like, oh well, yeah, on Sundays I like to host brunch and I want to brew coffee for 15 people. Well, maybe don't buy an AeroPress, or buy a few AeroPresses, and then you'll be better off. But try and think about what the most extreme case is for what you might need, and that'll help us kind of do some of that critical thinking for you and figure out what we have in our catalog that might suit your needs.
So think ahead. Make sure that your game playing what's going to happen in potentially. So it's kind of like short-circuiting the impulse buy a little bit. Like, if you buy something, you don't want to regret it, but have that satisfaction of just buying it, be like, oh, that's so cool, it's going to come in the mail. And then all of a sudden it doesn't fit on your counter, it doesn't heat up as fast as you thought it was going to, or like you're saying, you're really disappointed with the speed of the grinder on your bar. And it may be something that you could have known if you had gone a little bit slower, which sometimes is really hard to do when you're under the gun or you're excited about purchasing. So it's kind of a hard balance to be like both excited and practical.
Yeah, and I think, at least I hope that when people get on the phone with us, that's sort of, we're kind of, meeting them with their excitement. We're like, yeah, we want you to have this brand new machine. It's going to be so great. It's going to do exactly what you need. But we're also going to be like, hey, by the way, it's coming freight and you're going to need to be able to have people to bring it inside, or a forklift or something like that. Or, we can offer you an like interior delivery option for a little charge. And there's all these things that we have to think about that maybe you don't even consider in the equipment purchase, but we're there to give you these options and let you know what's up. And, I think that's true of anybody in this business. Is, we're not just going to drop a machine off at your front door and it weighs 400 pounds and it's in a crate on a pallet and you don't know how to get it in the front door. We're going to talk you through that process ahead of time and say, hey, just to make sure that here's what you're getting into. And as well, like I said, we still want to be excited for you. We're totally excited to have more, coffee shops open up in the U.S. We're from all over the place at Prima. If I go home, I want to know that there's a great cafe waiting for me. And if they're a customer of Prima, great. But we're just super excited for people to be getting into coffee all over the place. So again, we want to meet them with that excitement. We want to mirror that and match that. And we're totally jazzed for them. But we also want to be that voice of reason that's like, hey, by the way, here's what's actually going to happen before you get into that really, exciting part.
So what last piece of advice would you have for us as we are trying to create an assortment of equipment that works together well in our cafes and kind of helps us achieve our dreams of brewing great coffee at home or brewing great coffee in our coffee shops?
Well, like I said, I feel like I have a really exciting job and I get to play with new stuff all the time, and I get to try out new things when they're just hitting the market or even before they've hit the market, and that's a really amazing position to be in. But when I go home, I use a 1977 La Pavoni Europiccola. So I say that because it's really, really easy to get excited about the newest, hottest thing on the market. And it's really, really easy to get caught up in these trends and get caught up in the hype. And, there's a new shiny thing out there and you just have to have it. But at the end of the day, coffee is a little flexible. It's a little versatile. And there are many roads to get to the same place. You can make really great coffee in a simple, bee house dripper. You can also make really great coffee with a fancy, shiny new manual brewing toy or, the highest end espresso machine. But you can also make good espresso. You can make great espresso. You can do it on a variety of different products. So I would say, it's great to be enthusiastic about the new stuff. It really is. It's so exciting. It's, there are early adopters that love to be the first person to have something, for all its faults and failures as well as its high points. And that's fantastic. But I would say that, you don't have to follow those trends. You can kind of wait to see where they go. You can buy a machine now or a piece of equipment now that's kind of known to be reliable and steady and good. And then, in 5 years, if you still want to upgrade to the new hotness, you can do that. You can even probably sell what you have for a decent price and get some of your money back and make somebody else pretty happy because they just got a new thing that they weren't expecting to get. So, I don't think that we actually get too many people that are like, I want the newest thing. I want the best thing. And I think it's because we try not to get too caught up in the hype like that. We will absolutely get excited about new stuff if there's a reason to be excited about it. But we're also not going to try and sell the newest and most exciting thing to everybody if they don't need it. So, I'm sure some people have called us before and said, hey, I'm really looking for this new exciting thing. And we said, yeah, well, it is new and it is exciting, but have you thought about, old reliable? Do you want the brand new Slayer Steam, or do you want the, kind of tried and true Linea EE? So there's, I guess, just kind of like I said, there's sort of a reality, not like a reality check with Prima, but like we try and be kind of grounded and we try and get people in a place where they're comfortable and they'll have good results. And I would say that if you're looking to get into coffee on any level, try practicality too. Try and find whatever balancing point feels right to you. You don't need the most exciting thing to make great coffee. And if you're unsure of how to make great coffee with something a little bit more modest, that's, I think, what we're there for. We would love to help you make a great cup of coffee with whatever you have. I have made great coffee while traveling on the road with a hand grinder and hot water from a coffee machine at a rest stop. And, I know it's possible. And, if you're, a college student, you only have $50 or something like that, then I would love to tell you about how I made that great cup of coffee. And you don't need the, uber fancy super automatic espresso machine or something like that. You can have great coffee with a modest budget. So, all that is to say that, we have options for a reason, and the options are there because we believe in pretty much every single one of them. And if you're ever unsure that the new shiny toy that just hit our site isn't right for you, we would be happy to talk to you and say, yeah, you can still make great espresso without that. And here's how, and we'd love to help you.
Well, these are really going to be helpful, I think, for people to keep in mind when they are considering equipment. And not to really go back on what you were saying, but speaking of the new hotness, I'm just wondering what's next for Prima coming up, for the company, new things coming in that you're excited about, or if you've tested. What's going on in the future of Prima?
Man, ask me just about at any point of the year, and I'll probably have something on my horizon that I'm pretty jazzed about. So just now we were about to get December drippers listed on the website. I think they've fulfilled their Kickstarter. They've had a good, strong showing in that kind of crowdfunding market, and we finally got some stock in. We're really excited to get those out. It's a pour over dripper. It's got some cool features, but it's still it's this new thing. There's not a whole lot of innovation going on in pour over drippers. So it's really cool to have this, and we're really excited to see what people think of it. We also got these really cool shot timers made by a company called Luminaire. And Luminaire has done some pretty cool coffee projects in the past. I think most recently they've been working with La Marzocco on some of their electronics and systems in their espresso machines. But they released this product on their own that's an automatic shot timer that works with almost any espresso machine. Basically, if it has a 3-way solenoid, you can just kind of stick this little electromagnetic probe in there, and the shot timer will work to basically it starts counting when you turn the pump on, and it stops counting when you turn the pump off. And
Neat.
That's a really amazing modification. It's inexpensive, and it works with, like I said, almost any espresso machine, even a whole bunch of consumer espresso machines. So that's a really exciting product. It's a very unique product, and I don't think there are a whole lot of other options out there. I think there's some that are a little bit more expensive, and they have their own control boards that have to integrate in the espresso machine. But this is a very simple modification that'll add a lot of functionality. You don't have to look at your phone anymore while you're trying to pull a shot.
Sweet. Well, those are some great things to keep an eye out for. And I'm really excited to have gotten to talk to you today about all of these things. I think it's just kind of enriching to hear the values, the dedication, and to get some insights into how we can also make great decisions on equipment from you. So thank you so much for taking the time to join us on the show.
Yeah, and thank you so much for having me. I know that, we sponsor it, but it's really cool to get to be able to talk to other coffee professionals and kind of talk about what we're about.
Well, it was so great to get to talk to Steve about this side of the business. A lot of us will just take for granted that is there. So much work goes on behind the scenes in order to make this offering possible. And my thanks again to Steve for taking the time to share with us his knowledge and wisdom. I think we're lucky to have places like Prima that put so much effort into curating their offering list. And, like I said before, like green coffee offering lists provided by folks like Cafe Imports or Royal Coffee, you get to trust their process over time. Like having trusted partners in a supplier is really a critical relationship in specialty coffee. So when you find a good thing, you've struck gold, really. And grateful for people who take that part of the business so seriously and are always reaching for better and better iterations of their business and what they can offer the specialty coffee world. Some of the things that Steve shared, and this is something that I think is just true for business in general. The best businesses out there are the ones that have some kind of, not just a manual that says how to do things, but sort of like the way of being. And for them, it's the kind of equivalent of a barista's manual that describes some of the values behind why we do what we do. And the way to be Prima, that's a nice thing to know, is circulating in the company. And then, of course, I love what Steve shared about those three things that we need to be focusing on before making equipment selections. A lot of it is maybe if you're far down the road in coffee, you would look at them and say, well, that's just common sense. But when you're in the midst of opening a store and your head is swirling with so many ideas, it's hard to be objective. It becomes part of the reason why poor equipment selection is made. And that loss of objectivity really makes it a game of trying to find how you can get an espresso machine or a grinder that is cheap and just something that you can put in the store. Maybe you buy something that's used. It's not always the best thing to do unless you got a very reputable source for it and the ability to repair it for less than you can buy a new one for. But finding out how much things actually cost versus what you think they might cost is so critical. And that's the first step, is realistically, how much is that espresso machine going to cost? And Steve talks about how there's sticker shock sometimes when describing these costs to people opening stores or people looking to, maybe buy their first brand new espresso machine. But I'll tell you from my experience, it really is worth it when you're investing in something that's high quality. It's the engine of your coffee shop, and you don't want to necessarily just skimp on the cost when it comes to your equipment. So the second thing that Steve was mentioning we need to focus on or consider before purchasing equipment is the planned use of that piece of equipment in your store. It's easy for us to buy something, buy an espresso machine because it's the right price, okay? Even if you're spending a lot more than you really thought you were going to, you might be satisfied with it prematurely if you're not buying something that's the appropriate capacity for your shop. That goes both ways. You could buy something that's way overkill for your situation. Like if you're just starting out and you buy a 4-group espresso machine, chances are that you might be going a little bit too far in that direction of capacity, based on how many people would be actually required to use that to its max, versus a 2-group, for instance. Okay, in order to make the right equipment selection, you have to kind of project what kind of business you're going to do. How many drinks are you going to sell? How many shots go into each drink? What is the typical day going to look like in your bar? So you have to kind of close your eyes and imagine what it looks like to do that. And if you got a great business plan, chances are you already have sort of a rough estimate of what that looks like. And of course, that's all based on your menu too. So making equipment selections based on the planned use of that equipment is really, really critical. Now, the third thing and final consideration from Steve on the purchasing of equipment is you have to balance yourself against being swept away by the trends. The hardest part about this industry is that there is a new piece of equipment that comes out seemingly every day. A new tamper, a new pour over, a new piece of pour over equipment or kettle, a new modification to an espresso grinder. And just know that some of the most basic equipment out there is enough. It's enough for your espresso bar, and you don't have to feel this is, where FOMO comes in, the fear of missing out. And yeah, it's really easy to look at other coffee bars, to look at the equipment that's out there, all beautifully lined up on counters, and imagine that that is what you need to be successful in your bar. Really, all you need is equipment that produces great coffee at the hands of skilled technicians that works and is reliable. Visual is going to come into play for sure, but the degree to which people make decisions based on style or trend is a little scary. I think it would be interesting to know how much potential impact is lost in specialty coffee with all of the energy we put into the visual components of our bars versus making sure that the things that we have on the bar, even though they might not be the trendiest, are the most highly functional and reliable pieces of equipment. Who knows what that loss is? Just, I think it's wise what Steve said to make sure that you're making your decision based on the aforementioned items of budget and the appropriate use of that equipment in your store, and know that these trends are always coming and going. So that's a good piece of advice. Kind of have a balanced perspective and be careful that you're not swept away by the trends or by things that are just really shiny and new. And you're making decisions based on deeper, more foundational values of consistency, reliability, functionality, and of course, making sure that it looks good is totally fine too. So those three things are really great to keep in mind. Budget, what's the plan for that piece of equipment, and don't be swept away by the trends. The wise words from a guy who gets to see the ebb and flow of these things closer than most of us ever will. So my thanks again to Steve for showing us a little bit more about the background and behind the scenes of the specialty coffee equipment supplier world. And of course, if you want to see the fruit of Steve's work, you can go to prima-coffee.com and find out what they have to offer. Watch those tutorials that they have, those video tutorials on how to use all of this equipment. They have so many, and it's always fun to see them come by. Sometimes they shoot these tutorials in quills or at Synergos, and there's a lot of toil and attention that goes into making this the best that it can be. So prima-coffee.com. Check out their videos, check out their offerings, and tell them I said hello. So if you want to know more about Keys to the Shop, you can go to keystotheshop.com. You're going to find the show notes for this episode on the resources page, as well as all of the episodes available on the episodes page. Now, if you like what's going on here at Keys to the Shop, you like the show, go to iTunes and subscribe. And also, if you would, leave a rating or review. That would be really helpful to hear all about how the show has impacted you or your business in a positive way. If you want to reach out to me directly, you can do that by emailing Chris, Chris, at keystotheshop.com. I always look forward to hearing from you all out there in the Keys to the Shop audience. So we'll go out there and make great coffee on great equipment. And as always, I hope that this episode, as well as all of the other past episodes on the show, has given you keys to the shop.